So a year ago, I made this video, basically talking about how I thought Season 1 took place in some kind of TV show, Truman Show-esque reality. My theory is, essentially, that the entirety of Season 1 takes place in a heightened version of reality that is being basically broadcast as a TV show in and of itself, Truman Show style. And essentially, the ending for this series will end with the villain being one who controls all of reality, making it into some sort of TV show. The reason I thought this was because of all the fourth wall breaks and meta stuff that happened in that series. Stuff like the Doctor calling out non-diegetic music, the winks to camera by Maestro and Mrs. Flood, etc. Now that ultimately turned out very much to not be the case with Doctor Who Season 1. However, despite that, the idea that this era at least exists in some kind of TV show reality hasn't actually gone away and has only gotten more and more kind of traction the more and more meta this era has become. So in a moment of serendipitous timing, as I was recording this video, a brand new preview of Lux came out where the Doctor says this.
I missed a
Am I saying Katsu?
Now this could be referring to the character of Mr. Ring-a-Ding, he could be questioning who Mr. Ring-a-Ding is, or he could be saying, why am I saying Kurt? Because he's somewhat aware of his existence in a TV show, which gives further credence to this idea. But the reason why I'm talking about it today is that a quote has come out from a review of Doctor Who Episode 2 of Season 2, Lux, which perhaps indicates that maybe I was onto something, that perhaps indicates that maybe I was onto something last year. But before we get into that, do me a favour, subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 26,000 subscribers, and we're less than 200 subscribers away, so any support would be greatly appreciated. I do regular Doctor Who content here on the channel. So the quote I'm talking about comes from a site called Agents of Fandom, who did an early review of Lux. It was one of the reviews I didn't cover, actually. And I'm going to be taking the quote from Doctor Who Production News. The quote reads, "Fans will be rushing to talk about Mrs. Flood's appearance in this latest episode, as it leads us to believe that maybe her teasers are more connected to what's going on with Doctor Who in the real world than we have originally been led to believe." Now this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Similar to last series, Mrs. Flood is doing the whole fourth wall breaking thing, and seemingly is aware that she exists in some kind of show, especially in Robot Revolution where she says directly, "You didn't see me," to the audience. But more than that, Lux specifically has been touted as a very meta episode, and literally revolves around a cartoon coming out of a screen and into the real world. So what if Mrs. Flood is essentially the one controlling things? What if she is controlling the events of Doctor Who as though it were a TV show? This would explain why she's constantly the neighbour of companions and is encouraging them to board the TARDIS, but would also explain her knowledge of things like the TARDIS itself. But more than that, what if Mrs. Flood is a metaphor for something? People have pointed out that she dresses very similarly to companions. For example, at the end of Empire of Death, she looks very reminiscent to Romana 1, and she's also had looks very similar to that of characters like Clara Oswald. So what if she is a fan of Doctor Who, but more than that? Because it's the last bit of that quote that's really interesting to me. Maybe her teasers are more connected to what's going on with Doctor Who in the real world than we have originally been led to believe. Now, what is the major bit of speculation that's been going on about Doctor Who the last year? Cancellation, basically, right? You know, this whole idea of there being a pause, or Disney not renewing it, or there being a hiatus, all these different kind of rumours being floated about. And so what if Mrs. Flood represents not only the fan base, but also a fan who has become disillusioned with the show and is essentially using her godlike powers, maybe as something like the god of stories as an example, or the god of fiction, to bring it to a close. Now, is it a bit far-fetched to imagine that Russell T Davies, Disney, BBC and Bad Wolf would deliberately be keeping quiet on the future of the show in order to hide a plot twist? Yes, most definitely. However, Russell T Davies has done bonkers marketing strategies before, and the idea of them being non-committal to the show's future, only to then reveal that it's due to the fact that Mrs. Flood herself is a villain trying to stop Doctor Who from continuing, is such a funny idea to me that I just had to cover it. The idea of the villain of Doctor Who trying to cancel the TV show Doctor Who is such a fun idea to me that I just had to bring it up. And it ties into everything we've already known about her with the fourth wall stuff and the companion costumes like I've already mentioned. She represents a fan who loves Doctor Who and has been basically orchestrating Doctor Who for a couple of years, but has now become embittered and decides to end it. After all, she says that the Doctor's story ends in absolute terror, and how would she know that? Because she's the one that's going to make it happen. Essentially, Mrs. Flood is a god Doctor Who in-universe equivalent of Mary Whitehouse. In fact, why not go a step further? In the Robot Revolution, the Doctor says that someone told him to go and find Belinda. What if that person was Mrs. Flood, maybe in disguise so that he didn't recognise her? But if Mrs. Flood is the god of stories, what if she gave Belinda the exact DNA and face of a previous character to get the Doctor interested, because she knows that that's how the Doctor gets interested in companions, just like in Series 8 when Missy calls the 11th Doctor to go and meet Clara. It's all a plan to get to a certain point. Will this theory come true? Almost certainly no. But it's such a funny idea that I just had to talk about it. Especially with the last episode being titled The Reality War. To get even more meta, what if the reality war revolves around her trying to change reality in some way? Basically, in essence, trying to reboot Doctor Who to something that she would prefer. This explains why we've got fossils walking around and all this weird stuff going on in Wish World, because it's basically her trying to make the show more interesting. Heck, you remember that quote from ages ago where Conrad tries to be more like the Doctor for Ruby? Well, maybe Mrs. Flood sees that, and instead of the Doctor being the Doctor, she makes Conrad the Doctor. So you could kind of even do a meta commentary on the fact that he is a more traditional looking Doctor, and Ncuti is obviously a very different type of Doctor. I'm definitely reading too much into this, but it's just such a fun idea. Again, I think it's exceedingly unlikely that they would deliberately, intentionally stay quiet on the future of Doctor Who in order for a plot twist, but it would be incredibly funny. But let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments below. That'd be greatly appreciated. Please like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.